of Americans, kids that were absolutely deprived of their childhood, businesses that were destroyed, families that were torn apart, memories that you'll never get back, trillions of dollars of economic loss. We should at least have a conversation that isn't partisan. And yet, just for the record, there's not a single solitary Democrat senator that's willing to sit in this chamber and listen to your testimony. I think that's an outrage.
President Trump is in Beijing ahead of a high-stakes meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And Chad Groening tells us the status of Taiwan is expected to be one of the topics discussed.
Chinese President Xi Jinping continues to take the position that the island democracy of Taiwan is a breakaway province of China. And President Trump told reporters before departing for Beijing that he expects the communist leader will ask him to hold back on providing arms to Taiwan. Indeed, the Chinese have signaled that they intend to make Taiwan a central part of the talks. Gordon Chang is an Asian policy analyst and author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America.
I'm sure China will raise the issue of Taiwan. They always do in meetings with the United States. They'll want President Trump to show support for their position, and he should absolutely not do that.
Retired Navy Commander Kirk Lippold points out that the Taiwanese have refused to accept $8 billion in weapons we have offered to give them.
That tells me that they're not interested in being a free nation. Why are we picking a fight with China over Taiwan when Taiwan doesn't even want to make up their own mind what they want to do?
I'm Chad Groening.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement has identified more than 10,000 cases of potential fraud associated with a program that allows foreign students to extend their stay in the United States after graduating from college. This is ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons.
We are announcing that we have identified over 10,000 foreign students who claim to be working for highly suspect employers. And that's just among the top 25 OPT employers. This is only the tip of the iceberg.
ICE has confirmed that 2 suspects in a deadly Dallas shooting last week entered the country illegally. They now face deportation and multiple felony charges, including capital murder for the death of an unborn baby. Brooke Taylor has more from Dallas.
So investigators say this all started after an argument outside of a 7-Eleven. One group drove away from the gas station. The suspects followed them and opened fire on that car. And inside was a 22-week pregnant teenager. Police say she was shot multiple times and the bullet struck her unborn baby. The 17-year-old's mother survived, but her baby died after an emergency C-section. The suspects, 20-year-old Kainer Calero Hiron and 17-year-old Jeremy Zapata Ailman, both charged with capital murder. ICE says Calero Hiron is a Nicaraguan national who entered the country illegally in 2022, while Zapata Ailman is from Honduras, both now facing deportation.
And U.S. wholesale inflation came in hot last month. Producer prices rose 6% from a year earlier, the highest point in more than 3 years, as the Iran war pushes up energy prices. More news online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Thoughts of the child you were carrying keep pouring over in your mind. A deep, unrelenting sadness overshadows your days, and you wonder if you will ever feel whole again. There is hope and healing from a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline, 866-482-LIFE, and talk with someone who has been where you are. Your call is confidential, and we will help you find healing. 866-482-LIFE.
We inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. I'm Walker Wildmon. Glad to have you with us on this edition of the show. We're broadcasting live here on American Family Radio, and the show is hosted each week by Rick Green and myself. We're your host each week on the program. Glad to have you with us. As a brief reminder for those who listen to American Family Radio and enjoy the content, you can fetch all of the shows in the form of a podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. We're uploading the program each day in the form of a podcast on all the major podcast platforms, whether it be Apple, Androids, Google Play Store, or the Spotify. There's just a lot of different podcast platforms out there, but we're pushing out the program on all of those platforms each and every afternoon. So just go and type in the show name, and you can click the subscribe button or the follow button, and the latest episode of At the Core will be ready to go in your podcast library. Well, turning our attention to the scripture, we're in Acts chapter 4 this week. Acts chapter 4, looking at the first few verses here, where Peter and John were arrested as they were just finished performing miracles, healing the lame. It says in verse 3, and they laid hands on them, talking about the religious leaders, the Sadducees, the priest. They laid hands on Peter and John here and put them in custody, verse 3 says, until the next day, for it was already evening. And it says in verse 4 right after that, however, many of those who heard the word believed, and the number of men came to be about 5,000. And so here we have the persecution that comes on upon the early church, and then you also have the fact that the message, the word of God, obviously did not return void, because it says the number of men that believed in the teachings of Jesus delivered through the disciples here came to be about 5,000. And so 2 points can be made here amongst many, but for the sake of time, the first point is that persecution will come in various forms, some severe, some not as severe, but persecution can be expected for the believer, for the proclaimer of the teachings of Jesus and the entirety of Scripture. And then secondly, the work of God will not be hindered by the force of man or even the force of Satan. God's word will not return void per the Scripture. That's Acts chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. Well, I want to give you a little recap on what is going on with President Trump this week, as he just landed within the last, 12 hours in China. And he's on the ground there. One of his major, if not the major, diplomatic trips this term over the last 2 years. This is a very, very important trip, considering the interlocked economies that China and the U.S. share and enjoy. And so President Trump is over there. Meanwhile, you still have the Iran conflict ongoing. We have the blockade still in effect. But at the same time, you still have the Strait of Hormuz closed per Iran. So there's a lot going on, but this is a very pivotal trip. President Trump took with him multiple Fortune 100 CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies, including Tim Cook with Apple, the outgoing CEO of Apple. Elon Musk was on Air Force One. The NVIDIA chip CEO, was on Air Force One as well. So this is a major, mostly economic trip. And there's a lot that can be said about this. But before we do, I want to play clip 3. This is a Fox report, Trey Yingst, about the China trip, what's at stake there, and the fact that we have this lingering Iran conflict that President Trump and Xi are going to have to talk about at some point during this trip. Clip 3.
President Trump had a message for Chinese President Xi Jinping ahead of his departure to Beijing. The Chinese are the world's largest importer of Iranian crude oil.
What is your message to President Xi as it relates to the Iran war?
Well, I think, number one, we're going to have a long talk about it. I think he's been relatively good, to be honest with you. You look at the blockade, no problems. They get a lot of their oil from that area. We've had no problem, and he's been a friend of mine. He's been somebody that we get along with. And I think you're going to see that good things are going to happen. This is going to be a very exciting trip. A lot of good things are going to happen.
The Middle East remains on edge after the latest efforts for a diplomatic solution with Iran did not pan out. In a post on Truth Social overnight, President Trump said, in part, Iran had 159 ships in their navy. Every single ship is now resting at the bottom of the sea. They have no navy, their air force is gone, all technology is gone, their leaders are no longer with us, and the country is an economic disaster. Only losers, ingrates, and fools are able to make a case against America. With an ongoing U.S. military buildup across the region, reports indicate that Saudi Arabia conducted airstrikes against Iran during the war. Fox also reported on Tuesday the UAE took part at the end of Operation Epic Fury. The Iranians have continued their threatening language, worried that a bombing campaign will resume.
I can assure you that our armed forces are prepared for every scenario. I'm sure that anyone who dares to put their foot in Iran's territory, they would be badly regret.
Today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is holding a security assessment, so his forces are prepared if the war resumes.
Yingst on the China trip by President Trump, along with the Iran situation. And Bobby let me know during that clip that there's about 17 CEOs of major technology, manufacturing, and financial institutions all there on the trip with President Trump. They're now on the ground in China. It may bear out to be that China is central to getting this Iran deal finished. Now, once again, what the quote deal looks like, who knows at this point, but whatever the conclusion of this, what President Trump calls excursion, China could prove central to getting it over the finish line, because China and Iran are economic partners. Whether we like it or not, they are economic and military partners. If you don't believe me, look at the amount of oil that China gets from Iran. Look at the amount of weapons and anti-defense, anti-air defense, anti-aircraft systems that have been shipped from China to Iran. Now, albeit they don't work because we dominated their airspace within a matter of days, but nonetheless, the military and economic partnership with Iran and China is undeniable. You also have the Russia factor as well. But President Trump wants to get the Iran thing behind us, but he doesn't want to do it at the sacrifice of the overarching strategy of them not having nuclear weapons. So we'll see where this goes, but it could be that China is pivotal to wrapping this up. And on the Iran front, well, let me finish on China before we talk Iran the rest of this segment. China owes us, all right? China's been ripping us off for a long time on multiple fronts. We can talk intellectual property. We can talk product dumping. We could go a couple of different ways. We just had a mayor of a city in California arrested on spying on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. So China has been undercutting the U.S. for a long time. This isn't breaking news. It's not top secret. It's not controversial. China has been undercutting the U.S. economically and otherwise for a long time. Back during, this is Exhibit A here, back during the first term of President Trump cut an economic trade deal with China that was on paper a good deal for everyone. One of the key factors, or one of the key tenets that China agreed to in the deal was to buy a certain amount of American soybeans. China can't feed itself. China has to have American agriculture to feed its population. That's a fact. That's why China wants to buy American farmland, so they can feed their population. So President Trump cut the deal. China was supposed to buy X amount, billions of dollars worth of soybeans from American farmers. And that was priced into the markets. American farmers were looking forward to it. And guess what happened? Well, not only did you have COVID happen, but China completely reneged on the deal. And so when Biden comes in, nobody enforces the deal. And so we held our end of the deal. China didn't. So they owe us. China owes us. She owes us. And President Trump has to get something out of this trip. But because if you're the American worker, if you're the American taxpayer, and we're flying over your billion and trillionaires, and they're Elon Musk is getting close to being a trillionaire. I think he might be the first, but nonetheless, if you're flying over your multi-billionaires and your high-level CEOs of all these major corporations, which is fine, whatever. I don't like the perception of it, but nonetheless, the American people and the American taxpayer and the American worker, we better get something out of it. There's going to have to be something populist, nationalistic, economic benefit out of this trip to China. That's what the American people want. And I think voters going to the ballot box in November, that's what they want as well. So I don't know what's going to come out of this China trip, but it just needs to be focused, laser focused on not just making sure that Apple gets to cut a deal, not just making sure that Huawei gets to cut a deal. That's the Chinese company. I'm thinking about NVIDIA. Not just making sure NVIDIA gets to cut a deal, or fill in the blank, or Elon Musk gets his lithium batteries from China, or whatever the case. The overarching purpose of this trip and outcome needs to be twofold, in my opinion. It needs to be the end of the Iran conflict, with working with China on a deal. And then secondly, it needs to be some sort of economic package, some sort of trade package that helps bolster the American middle class, bolster the manufacturing base in America, and help farmers in America finish the deal. That's what I would say if I'm at the table with Xi. Let's finish the soybean purchase, because you said you were going to buy American soybeans to the tune of billions of dollars. You didn't follow through on it, so now's the time over the next 6 months to follow through on it. So something like that's going to have to happen, and I think that would be very positive for the president. I think it would be very positive for the Republican Party, and it would give them not only a leaf or a feather in their hat, but it would also give them something to talk about and to talk up with American voters as we head into the midterm. The last, I don't have time for this clip, but I'll summarize it, and maybe we'll have time later on. But this Iran negotiation has proven very difficult if you can't tell. We're over 60 days into this conflict, and even President Trump admitted, and we'll play the clip later, that this negotiating with Iran is overly difficult. I mean, they are the most complicated, difficult party to work with. He said in his experiences, nearly 80 years of being a businessman, being in business for the last, since he was a young adult, 60 plus years. He said this is the most challenging party I've ever dealt with. He said most deals we can, we might disagree, but at the end we'll figure it out. He said we go back and forth on these tenets of this deal, and he just said we're not even close. I mean, we're so far apart, and they're so unreasonable. This goes back to prove my point, and that Iran doesn't want a deal. In order to get any deal, both parties have to want a deal. Iran doesn't want a deal. We'll be back.
Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. After Jesus resurrected their brother, Lazarus, Martha and Mary hosted a dinner party in their Bethany home. You can imagine the excitement and the buzz that swirled through the town, and the number of people who came because the rabbi had returned. Martha busied herself with preparations. Mary sat at Jesus' feet, basking in his teaching. Life's demands can easily consume our focus, but one thing is necessary, that we remain at Jesus' feet, anchored in his word.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Satan wants to destroy God's sacred design for marriage and family. How do we defend them in this hostile culture? Activate Summit 2026 is July 16th through the 18th at the Cadence Bank Arena in Tupelo, Mississippi. And the focus this year is on God's plan for marriage and family. Speakers include Bert Harper.
Love your neighbor as yourself. Do y'all see the emphasis God puts on that?
Jeff Shreve.
The devil uses people as his pawns, so to speak.
Jessica Peck.
Stepping into their world, what they like, that's a great way to start.
And more. There's also Activate Kids, a separate track for children ages 6 to 12. And something new this year. Get separate tickets for an exclusive meet and greet reception at AFA with the conference speakers on the evening of July 17th. Register now for Roots to Fruit. Grounded in truth, growing in grace. Visit afa.net/summit. afa.net/summit.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildmon, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, we are announcing 2 tours coming up in 2027, March of 2027. We're going to Greece and we're going to Italy. The Greece tour we call the Footsteps of Paul, and you're going to follow the footsteps of St. Paul in the country of Greece. And then the Italian tour, the tour of Italy, Venice, Florence, Pisa, Rome. We're calling the Make Lasagna Great Again tour. And these are coming up in March of 2027. And if you want to read all about them, the itinerary, the cost, everything you need to know about these tours coming up in March of Greece and Italy, go to tours.afa.net. That's tours.afa.net. We're going to have a lot of fun, a lot of good fellowship, and see some of the most historic and iconic sites in the world.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to The Core here on American Family Radio. Walker Wildmon here with you on this edition of the program. You can watch the program wherever you follow us on social media on all the American Family Radio handles. You can watch the live stream, and over at stream.afa.net, you can create a free account there at stream.afa.net to watch the live programs and past episodes as well if you prefer video. Well, introducing our next guest, Louisiana State Representative Mark Wright. He's on with us. He represents District 77. He's also running for Public Service Commissioner there in the state of Louisiana. Representative Wright, glad to have you on today's program.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the discussion.
Well, before we jump into policy talk and why you're running for Public Service Commissioner and some of the items that would be within your purview there, tell us a little bit about your time as state representative and some of the things you've accomplished over the years.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So my wife and I and our 5 children live in Covington for about 20 plus years. And sometime almost 10 years ago, there was a state rep who resigned to run for something else. And based on some of the work I had done in the community, it just made sense to run at that special election. So have represented the community since then. I come from a maritime background, so naturally, sort of focused on some of that, given the Mississippi River, things like that. So served on the Transportation Committee and eventually chaired the committee for a few years last term. And my focus was a lot on trying to strengthen our port strategy and how we invest in those. In fact, we have a committee meeting tomorrow about it. It's a commission that essentially focuses on strategy for investment. And we have 36 ports in Louisiana, so you can imagine there's a lot there to stretch or deal with. And I also did the bill to create a state maritime academy in Louisiana, one of 7. It's just starting, but I was proud to be a part of that. It certainly didn't do everything on it, but
Representative Wright, we lost your connection.
You there?
Yeah,
Okay.
we got you now. Sorry, we dropped you for just a minute, but we got you back.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, that is a great opportunity for our young people to find a career, especially in Louisiana, but certainly across the United States. And then just moving forward, last 2 years I was chair of our Republican delegation in the House, kind of like the majority leader in the House, and that was when Governor Landry came in, and we've taken a lot of strong steps since he came in. Really have passed some legislation and taken other policies that have sent us in the right direction, especially when it comes to jobs and investment. We see some projects coming in the next 5 years that are unbelievable. They're generational type projects, investments, and we're certainly proud to be able to put that together and get our workforce ready and give people an opportunity.
Representative Wright, let me ask you about a topic under the purview of Public Service Commissioner. That's the seat you're running for, the position you're running for in Louisiana right now. Energy, the topic of energy, specifically powering homes, powering businesses. That's one of the items that you would have some say over and some regulation over, if you will, in the state of Louisiana. The question I have is what can be done to lower the cost of energy, specifically power for homes and businesses? I know some of this falls on the private sector, but at the same time, these are public utilities. So what are some things that can be done to make energy more affordable, in your instance, in Louisiana?
Right. Well, look, first off, Louisiana is blessed to have a lot of natural gas opportunities. So we have been ranked as high as number 2 in the country for lower rates. So we do have a good environment for it, but certainly there's times when it hasn't, people haven't seen that in their bills. In Louisiana, with our Public Service Commission, we approve the rates, and those companies that provide them, basically plan out the year ahead. There's long range planning to go with it. So you have two aspects of it. You have it where the companies, the utility companies provide it, but they also generate it. And so generation is, in my opinion, where you want to provide your focus on saving residents money, providing, having reliable power is certainly important with a state like Louisiana with hurricanes and other storms. So natural gas has been our focus. But having said that, nuclear is proving to be a great option for us to dig into. And our governor has started to help our economic development department work through that. President Trump issued a few executive orders that essentially takes the nuclear supply chain and makes it a lot easier for those things to develop. And when I say those things to develop, nuclear was a great source for many years, but about 30, 40 years ago, we stopped developing things. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I'm a skeptic, so to speak, of climate change, but when you see the people who are concerned about that talking about solar and wind as better options, one thing that was left off is nuclear. And if we have aircraft carriers and submarines that can live off a nuclear reactor in times of war, then certainly the innovations there to develop that for our residents. And I think you're going to see that in the next 10 to 20 years. It's just very expensive to develop and test, but that's where we want to focus because it's a good balance for baseline power, right? Natural gas is a great baseline power, but as we see, the global market, sometimes the price spikes up for periods of time. Mm-hmm. And so if you have that baseline nuclear option, it really does, that's a good two-step to keep things moving and provide reliability for our residents.
Yeah, the small modular nuclear reactors that are currently being developed, and I know that Secretary Wright and the Department of Energy is expediting some of these processes and permits, et cetera. You're talking about, once deployed, you're talking about very affordable energy because of just the longevity of it and the amount of homes and businesses that can be powered for a long, long time for one of these stations, if you will, or substations. How much? Once again, you're running for public service commissioner, so you would. This will be one of many things that you oversee, but how much control or authority would a state level official, such as public service commissioner, have over the permitting, the approval, and the processing of something like a small modular nuclear reactor, whether it be at a data center, at a local municipality, et cetera? Is this something you would have a pretty large say over, or is this something that goes into the federal realm that you're just reliant on them for permitting and approval? How much control would you have?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's still a significant number of steps that we would take at the state level. But when you get into nuclear, clearly the feds have more of a focus on how some things are done and what's available. But as a commission, we have an ability to sort of dictate and encourage and vote or allow certain steps to move forward, encouraging certain companies to develop it. So that, they've said, and I don't know other states well, but I mean, apparently our commission is one of the stronger ones in the country. We are one of 10 states, I believe, that elect our commissioners for public utilities. And certainly when you hear of the companies from around the country talk about Louisiana, we can set a tone that really does help benefit our residents. One of the things I'll point out, I know we're going to get to this, but the data centers. So the one that Louisiana developed, the first one, the Meta project, which is right across the river from Mississippi. My understanding is they see that as the gold standard, how we sort of led them to what we'd like to see. And it basically led to President Trump in his State of the Union address talk about the direction he wanted to see these companies go in when they're developing data centers. So you could say that we played a role in that. Now, he probably would have done it on his own, but my point is that we took some steps that provided an example. And now it really is about us as a commission, or should I win, to hold the companies to it. Because there's certainly an opportunity, or there's a situation where some of these companies would cause problems, for the grid, for our residents, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But as long as we hold them to it, there won't be as many problems because of the model that's been set up. And we'll see where it all goes. There's a lot of data centers being developed around the country. It's going to be interesting to see what comes in 10 to 15 years, because I think I mean, innovation comes quickly and in unexpected ways. So I'm kind of curious how many of these are going to exist in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, we got about 2 minutes left. My thoughts on this, and I'll let you have the final word on the data centers. I'm not anti-data center. I am skeptical of this mass deployment of data centers, especially near residential areas. I think it can be a major problem. I think there's some zoning issues that need to be looked at, because people ought not have in their backyard be listening to these massive fans and massive generators 24/7. It's just utterly obnoxious. That's why we have zoning to begin with. So I think there needs to be heavy scrutiny on where the data centers are being placed, and to your point, the energy that they're going to be consuming and how much they're expecting the local energy provider to pay up, if you will, to get the infrastructure in place. I think these multi-billion-dollar companies that are doing quite fine economically, they need to be willing to invest what needs to be invested so that the local taxpayer doesn't foot the bill or have one of these, for example, in their backyard. Last word. We got about 2 minutes left.
Listen, you're absolutely right. We want to encourage business development, economic innovation. I like the model we came up with, which essentially is forcing, they're more in rural areas in Louisiana, but they're going to foot the bill for the generation, and we've got guards in to keep it from drawing on the grid to take away from residents. So I like where we're going, but we got to keep them to that. And, that's half the battle, right?
Absolutely. Well, we've been talking to Representative Mark Wright from Louisiana. He's currently running for Public Service Commissioner. Real quick, tell us when your primary is, when the election date is there in the state of Louisiana.
Sure. So Republican primary is this Saturday. We've had early voting up to this point, which usually is about half the votes. And then a runoff would be at the end of June. And then the final general would be in the fall. So if you're in Louisiana and you're a Republican, you vote by Saturday if you haven't already.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks, Representative Wright. Best of luck in the Saturday election and maybe runoff. We'll see how that goes. But we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care. God bless.
Absolutely. That's Louisiana State Representative Mark Wright. He represents District 77 there in the state, and he's also currently running for Public Service Commissioner. That election is this Saturday, May 16th, and an eventual runoff possibly in June if that's necessary, and then general election in November. So we appreciate him coming on and highlighting some of the work that he has done and the work that he's doing in the future. This nuclear power, this small modular nuclear power that's being developed and currently being tested by the Department of Energy at the federal level is critical. This has to, I cannot emphasize enough how quickly this needs to move. It's a shame that we're just now getting here, that it took us, a 30 to 40 year break on nuclear innovation to get to this point where we're back into it, so to speak. But once this gets deployed, if done properly, and if the feds and everybody just get out of the way, you're talking about very, very affordable energy. You're talking about a drop in energy cost for the American household and American businesses. So this is just has a potential. I can't state enough with the proper words how much of a game changer this modular nuclear energy could be if done properly. And if deployed at scale, you can run entire cities off of these modular nuclear reactors, and it will absolutely drive down the cost of energy. And for those who may be in the traditional energy sector, whether it be coal, natural gas, et cetera, look, there's plenty of needs for that. There's plenty of needs out there for those traditional energy sources such as natural gas, et cetera. So there should be no concern, not to mention we've got the rest of the world still running on coal, still running on oil, still running on natural gas. So, and we can export that, which we're doing that now. We're backfilling what's being missing out of the Strait of Hormuz, which is roughly 50% production and shipping down there in the Strait. From Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, et cetera, Kuwait. So we're backfilling that now, and we can continue backfilling that. We can fuel Europe. During the start of the Ukraine war, we were sending LNG tankers over to Europe to heat Europe during the winter. So, and that was coming from the Texas ports, from the Louisiana ports, et cetera. So there's room for all of the energy sector. There's room for all of the traditional energy and nuclear. All of it can be at the table and be happy. There's plenty of needs for the world to be energized, to be fueled, and it's a win-win-win. And at the end of the day, the American consumer could have their energy costs go down drastically, and we can begin exporting some of these traditional energy sources. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Tune in Saturdays at 1:30 Central for The Compass with host Rick Beggs and iVoter Guide President Debbie Wuthnow. Each weekend, The Compass will seek to navigate the public square with faith, truth, and conviction. Rick and Debbie will keep tabs on upcoming elections and remind us of the importance of our participation in them. The Compass reminds us that God is our true north. Be listening for The Compass, Saturday afternoons at 1:30 Central on American Family Radio.
The mission of American Family Association is to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture and give aid to the church here and abroad in its task of fulfilling the Great Commission. Further, AFA believes this ministry, as well as everything in the heavens and on the earth, belongs to God, and AFA's role is that of a trusted manager.
Thank you for standing with the American Family Association.
This is Walker Wildmon with AFR, and we're sending Bibles. Here's Michael with Bible League International.
This spring marks the 32nd anniversary of the Rwandan genocide, in which nearly 1 million people in this African nation were slaughtered in only a few days' time. Hutu and Tutsi families have grieved the loss of loved ones, and that includes Dali.
Her husband and one of her sons were killed, and she just couldn't forgive those who killed her loved ones. True forgiveness only came when she learned about Christ's work at the cross, about which she was reading in her Bible. So she recalled that Jesus asked his Father to forgive those who punished him.
Reading those words of Jesus in her very own Bible is what helped Dali find the grace and gumption to forgive those who murdered her family. And today, 100 in her small village in Rwanda have said yes to Jesus after seeing how he's brought healing to Dali and to so many who lack access to God's Word. $5 sends a Bible, $100 sends 20, $500 sends 100. Walker?
Give generously at 800-YES-WORD, 800-YES-WORD, or visit sendbiblesnow.org. Sendbiblesnow.org.
The enemy wants to destroy anything of God's, especially mankind who is made in God's image.
What would it be like if every person knew that they were created in the image of God?
We're talking about people loved by the Father, people for whom Jesus died.
We have to stand on God's truth.
We hear in culture all the time, we need to find ourselves. We need to go find our identity. We are already defined. We are known before the foundations of the world.
In His Image is a life-changing film that has helped people break free from the grip of evil. It will take you through Scripture to show the truth, and its powerful testimonies will destroy Satan's attempts to pervert God's perfect design.
We now know with the genome of all of the DNA that there is no propensity towards a genetic disposition to homosexual behavior.
Watch it for the first time or again with someone who needs to see it. Anytime on AFA Stream. Stream.afa.net.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Walker Wildmon.
Welcome back to today's program here on American Family Radio. You can always listen to AFR by downloading the American Family Radio app on your smartphone, on your tablet device. We even have the app on Roku and Apple TV. So pretty much all the major app stores, you can download the American Family Radio app and listen live and to past episodes there on the AFR app. Well, I want to move on to our next guest for this segment. Ira Melman is the media director over at FAIR, Federal Immigration. Here I am without the acronym spelled out. But Ira, you tell us, Federation for American Immigration Reform.
There you go. You got it.
Yeah, I knew I had it somewhere. I just had to dig for it. Ira is with us, obviously, to talk about President Trump's immigration policy, what the Democrats have been doing to try to stall that policy and the implementation of what President Trump and the Department of Homeland Security are doing. Ira, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Well, Ira, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and give folks who aren't familiar with FAIR some of the background on the work that you guys do there.
Yeah, FAIR tries to represent the interest of the American public in immigration policy. We forget sometimes it's a public policy. It is supposed to serve public interest and the good of the American public. That kind of gets lost in all the special interests that have been kind of chipping away at enforcement of our immigration policies and trying to use it to their advantage. But the policy exists to protect the interests of the American people. And we are the primary constituency, and FAIR tries to represent those interests. I actually first got into this issue years ago when I worked for the governor of Colorado, a liberal Democrat, who recognized the impact that it was having on the state of Colorado, on how the money was being spent on social services that were being provided. So, this used to be a bipartisan issue, but it's become very polarized in recent years.
Yeah, and to your point, once again, we're talking to Ira Melman with FAIR, Federation for American Immigration Reform. To your point about the traditional bipartisan nature of immigration policy and the positions therein, I've played clips of Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, even President Obama, stating things that are current Republican Party positions on immigration only 12, 15, 20 years ago, now they've completely flipped. It's almost unrecognizable where the Democrat Party is on this issue. One thing we wanted to definitely talk to you about, and then we'll see where this goes. There's a lot of things we could talk about on immigration. But the first thing is this recent showdown that has thankfully ended with the Department of Homeland Security. The American people, I know it's hard to keep up with all the ins and outs of how D.C. works and how these agencies are funded. But nonetheless, correct me if I'm wrong, the Democrats were able to partially keep Department of Homeland Security unfunded, at least for those 2 months. Tell us how all that went down and what the real fight was about.
Yeah, I mean, first thing to quote Yogi Berra, it ain't over till it's over. And until that reconciliation bill is passed and signed by the president, it's not over. But we are on the right track now. The Democrats used the funding for the Department of Homeland Security as leverage to try to get this administration to stop enforcing our immigration laws. Essentially, what they wanted to do was go back to the policies of the Biden administration, the policies that brought us 10 million people crossing the border illegally over the course of 4 years, the policies that let people into this country, release them here without knowing who they were, and the damage that they might cause once they were here. And look, as you pointed out, it used to be a bipartisan issue. It's not anymore. The Democratic Party has become the party of open borders, probably for a variety of reasons, ideological, political, but whatever it is, I think most Americans would say it's not serving the interests of the American people. And their demands were essentially that ICE could not execute an arrest without getting a judicial warrant. We have upwards of 18 million people in this country illegally. If you have to go through that process for each and every one of them, it's never going to end. We're going to be doing this forever and ever. They also wanted to limit where ICE could actually carry out its enforcement actions. They set aside so many areas that were off limits that it would have become virtually impossible for ICE to do its job. So, these were the key sticking points. The president and the Republicans in Congress refused to give in. Now we are on the process of passing funding for ICE and the Border Patrol separately as part of the reconciliation bill. The president has said he wants it on his desk by June 1st. This would fund ICE and Border Patrol through the remainder of this administration. So we wouldn't have to go through this again. We've cleared the first major hurdle, which was the budget resolution. Now they're hammering out the final details. We expect that it'll get done, but as I said, until it's actually done, till the president's signature is on it, we have to wait and see.
Let me ask you this on immigration policy in general. The numbers that I've read all kinds of numbers on the number of illegal immigrants currently in the country. That number's been floated north of 10 million. Some say 20. President Trump and his team have said 30. All over the map. The latest, when I say latest in air quotes, the latest report that is repeatedly reported on by the media goes back over a decade ago. We're talking of President Obama's days when they're quoting this official report on the number of illegal immigrants in the country. So it's very much outdated data that the media often reports. But what are we looking at here? I heard you say 18 million. I'm not sure if that was the total number or the number that came in under Biden. But what does your organization show, or what are your estimates on the number of illegal immigrants currently in the country?
Well, the number that I quoted was from a report that FAIR did looking at Census Bureau data, variety of other data. We estimated that the ones that could be confirmed was about 18.6 million at the start of the Trump administration. Okay. The numbers may have actually gone down because, number one, the border is now secure, so we're not getting a lot of people coming across illegally. Number two, in spite of the obstruction, ICE has been out there doing its job. The administration claims that during the first year in office, 675,000 illegal aliens were formally deported, but another 1.5 million left on their own. And that really is the key. It's got to be a combination of enforcement, coupled with sending clear messages to people who are in the country illegally that, it is time to go home. And really, this is the way we enforce most civil laws in this country. When the Highway Patrol wants to enforce the speed limit, they don't pull over every person who's going above the speed limit. They pull over a few. They put some squad cars out on the side of the highway. The rest of us get the message and we take our foot off the gas. The IRS audits enough tax returns that the rest of us file honest returns. So this is the way, the damage, not just under the Biden administration, but it goes back years and years under Democratic and Republican administrations. This is the way you undo the damage. You do enough enforcement that people get the message and decide, what, it's not worth sticking around. So, it may have gone down, but there's still a lot more work to do.
Let me ask you about your thoughts and your organization's thoughts on a moratorium idea. Once again, we're talking to Ira Melman. He's media director over at FAIR, and we're talking immigration policy. One idea that I've thought about, and it's not original to me, this has been floated by policy folks for a long time, but one idea that I do tend to favor is a moratorium, obviously on illegal immigration. That's a no-brainer. But even a moratorium on legal immigration for maybe, let's say, 2 to 4 years, because there's been so much damage, both legal and illegal, to the American economy through the immigration system, that honestly, in my opinion, we need to take some sort of a break, if you will, from this flooding, even through legal means. This flooding in the legal case, over 1 million a year we're allowing into the country through legal means, whether it be refugee programs or work programs, et cetera. Does that idea have any traction, like in the administration or in Congress, or is that like a far-fetched, idea, a moratorium on legal immigration?
It's not far-fetched, and I think it's less far-fetched thanks to the Biden administration. The American public had a taste of what it's like to have just mass immigration that never ends. And as you point out, we've had historically high levels, including legal immigration, for many, many years. And the system does need to be overhauled. Going back to the idea of the policy benefiting the interests of the American people. We have had a legal immigration system since the 1960s that favors people based on who they're related to, not based on what they're likely to contribute once they are here. So what we need to do is to shut down the current system. Congress needs to legislate new immigration laws that are appropriate for the 21st century, not the mid-20th century. Look at people's skills. Look at their likelihood to assimilate into the cultural mainstream of the United States. We have backlogs in the legal immigration system that go, in some categories, extend 20 years or more. So, you could apply to come to the United States today based on some valid claim to come here under the current law. But you won't be admitted for another 20 years. So the whole system makes no sense. It doesn't serve the interests of the country. We don't get to select people based on any objective assessment of their likelihood to succeed and fit in here in the United States. And at the same time, we are making promises to people that we can't really keep. If you're 30 years old and we tell you, you can come to the United States in 2050, it doesn't do you much good. So we need to just have a rational system that sets reasonable limits and reasonable criteria that serve the interests of the country. So that a moratorium would help in that respect, yes.
Absolutely. We've been talking with Ira Melman with the Federation for American Immigration Reform, otherwise known as FAIR. Ira, tell our folks your website where they can check out more about your work and, of course, read some of your opinions and writings that you put out.
The best place is, as you point out, the website, fairus.org. That's FAIRUS.org, fairus.org. There's tons of information. There's all sorts of ways that people can get involved. And, please come and visit the website.
Excellent. All right, Ira, thanks so much for coming on the program. We appreciate you joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. That's Ira Melman with the FAIR organization, a major public policy organization focused primarily on America's immigration policy, very reputable organization that they've been running. I've tracked some of their studies and their research, and their policy proposals that they work with in Congress. So very, very good organization on that front. Just to wrap up this topic before we end the show, one of the problems that we have with a moratorium that make this idea more challenging and more unrealistic at this juncture is America is currently in the midst. If you don't already know, I've talked about this on countless occasions, but America is currently experiencing a demographic crisis, all right? We're experiencing a demographic crisis because we're not having enough children. That's putting it bluntly and just as broadly as I possibly can. And when you do that as a society, as a culture, as an economy, the only way to survive is to import individuals into the country to backfill this mass demographic loss that we're having through an extremely low birth rate. Lowest birth rate in the last 100 years is impossibly the lowest birth rate ever. But as far as it being tracked, we are have been experiencing a birth rate decline since the 1950s and the 1960s. We've been under 2% since the 60s. And I tell people this almost every other week, and they look at me and go, there's no way that's true. They go, there's no way that's true, that America has been below 2% birth rate since the 1960s. And I tell them, go look it up. Go look it up. Since the 1960s, we've been below 2%. It might have been the early 70s when this kind of tipped below 2%. But folks, this is just common sense. And this goes back to God's plan for humans to be fruitful and multiply, for man and woman to be fruitful and multiply. But as a nation, as a country, in order to thrive, in order to have human flourishing, in order to not just survive, but to thrive and exist and continue as a civilization, we have to replace ourselves with people that are our offspring, our blood, so that they can be trained and raised in our values, in our culture, and learn what it means to be American. And when you don't do that, and instead you import people from all around the world, most of which don't even share our values, don't even know anything about America, how America was founded, what our ancestors went through, and have any type of blood or cultural identity, when you lose that, well, the country just turns into a different country, and you're not able to keep that national identity that brings about unity and continuation of culture and ideals. So this is not controversial stuff. Every civilization has to go through this. Every civilization experiences these type issues. And America is going through it right now. And this is going to have to be addressed. The demographic crisis is going to have to be addressed. We'll see you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Their investment is only for Donald Trump. It's not for the Republican Party. And I think this is another thing that we as conservatives have failed to do during the entire arc of the Trump era, is actually take the Trump voters